You believe that Reddit is the front page of the internet. You see the friendly alien logo and you think of a digital town square where democracy thrives and communities flourish. This is the first mistake of the uninformed. Reddit is not a social network. It is a high-density data refinery built on the backs of millions of unpaid workers. It is a digital coliseum where human behavior is harvested, categorized, and sold to the highest bidder. While you are arguing about the best way to cook a steak or sharing memes about a depressed frog, the architects of this platform were quietly building a wall around your words. They were preparing for a heist that would change the valuation of the company from a few $100 million to a multi-billion-dollar powerhouse. Is Reddit a community of hobbyists, or is it a carefully guarded cage where the raw data for the next generation of artificial intelligence is being grown in a petri dish? The air in San Francisco is often damp and cold, carrying the scent of the Pacific Ocean and the exhaust of expensive electric cars. In a sleek office building in the heart of the city, the atmosphere is even colder. There are no foosball tables here. There are no colorful beanbags or signs of the whimsical Silicon Valley of the past. There is only the hum of high-performance servers and the quiet, rhythmic clicking of keyboards. Steve Huffman, the man known to the world by his username Spez, sits in a chair that costs more than your first car. He is looking at a dashboard. He is not looking at the latest viral video or a thread about artisanal coffee. He is looking at the API call volume. He is looking at the rate at which external companies are sucking the lifeblood out of his platform. For years, Reddit was the open field of the internet. It was a place where anyone could build a tool, a bot, or a third-party app. It was a playground, but playgrounds do not move the needle on a balance sheet. Playgrounds do not have skin in the game when it comes to an initial public offering. Imagine a Walmart parking lot at 3 in the morning. It is a place of absolute chaos. There are people trading goods, there are small fights breaking out in the corners, and there are groups of people forming deep and strange bonds. This is the mundane reality of the Reddit community. Each subreddit is a different aisle in this infinite supermarket. One aisle contains the refined discussions of theoretical physicists. Another aisle is filled with people who are obsessed with pictures of bread stapled to trees. It is messy, it is loud, and for a long time, it was considered a liability. Investors looked at this mess and saw a toxic waste dump that could never be cleaned up. They saw a place where brand safety went to die, but they were looking at the surface. They failed to see the gold buried beneath the trash. They failed to see that this landfill was actually a giant living dictionary of human thought. The hard reality of the business world is driven by numbers that do not care about your feelings. Reddit has over 500 million monthly active users. They produce more than 100,000 posts every single day. This is not just content, it is training data. In the current gold rush of artificial intelligence, a single sentence written by a human is worth more than a gallon of oil. Large language models like those developed by Google and OpenAI are hungry. They need to know how humans talk, how they argue, and how they joke. They need the slang of a teenager from Ohio and the technical jargon of a plumber from New Jersey. Reddit is the only place on Earth where all of this exists in one searchable database. In February of 2024, Reddit signed a deal with Google. The price tag was $60 million a year. The product? Your conversations. Your advice on how to fix a leaky faucet. Your long rants about why the latest superhero movie was a disappointment. All of it was packaged and sold. This move was the ultimate strategic play. It turned a struggling social media site into an essential infrastructure company for the AI age. But this move came at a cost. To sell the data, Huffman had to lock the doors. He had to kill the third-party apps that were accessing the data for free. This was the moment of the great betrayal. This was the moment when the strategic mastermind decided that the bottom line was more important than the spirit of the community. The scene of the 2023 API protest was unlike anything the internet had ever seen. Thousands of subreddits went dark. The front page of the internet was a ghost town. Moderators, the people who work for free to keep the site running, were in a state of open rebellion. They felt they had a stake in the company. They felt they were the ones who built the value. But in the cold logic of the corporate suite, they were merely tenants who had forgotten that they did not own the building. Steve Huffman did not blink. He watched the numbers. He knew that human habit is stronger than human outrage. He knew that people would eventually come back to the digital landfill because there was nowhere else to go. Do you think the protests mattered? Do you believe that your voice has power in a system where you are the product? The data says otherwise. Following the protest and the subsequent lockout of third-party developers, Reddit proceeded with its initial public offering. The valuation hit $6.6 billion. The stock price moved the needle for early investors and corporate partners. The transition was complete. Reddit had successfully moved from a chaotic community to a disciplined data corporation. It had become a machine that turns human passion into shareholder value. This is the modern echo of the platform. When you open the app today, you are not just browsing a forum. You are entering a data factory. Every upvote is a data point. Every comment is a lesson for an algorithm. Every minute you spend scrolling is a tiny fraction of a cent in a multi-billion-dollar valuation. The bizarre obsession with the initial public offering led to a ruthless war against the very people who created the site. It was a cold, calculated move that proved one thing. In the world of high-stakes business, the community is a tool, and the data is the prize. The greatest trick Reddit ever pulled was convincing the world that it was a digital democracy. You look at the upvote and downvote arrows, and you see a fair system where the best ideas rise to the top. This is the ultimate illusion of the common man. In reality, Reddit is a masterfully engineered machine designed to exploit the human desire for validation and tribalism. It is not a town square. It is a high-performance centrifuge that separates human attention into discrete, sellable categories. While you think you are participating in a global conversation, you are actually feeding a beast that thrives on the very friction it creates. This is the algorithm of anarchy. It is a blueprint that turned a simple link-sharing site into the most valuable collection of human intent on the planet. Walk with me through the digital architecture. Imagine the New York City subway system at rush hour. Thousands of people are moving in different directions, carrying different stories, and speaking dozens of languages. It looks like total chaos, but if you look at the tracks, the switches, and the power lines, you see a rigid and cold logic. The people are just the cargo. In the world of Reddit, the subreddits are the stations. Each one is a silo. Each one is a dedicated space where a specific human obsession is cultivated. From the latest breakthroughs in quantum computing to the most mundane complaints about a neighbor in a small town in Idaho, every thought is organized. But why? Why create this massive, unmanageable sprawl? Because in the eyes of a strategic mastermind, chaos is the most fertile ground for data extraction. Do you believe that the moderators who spend 10 hours a day cleaning up your favorite subreddit are doing it out of the goodness of their hearts? Or are they the unwitting janitors of a multi-billion-dollar estate that they will never own? The blueprint of Reddit relied on a daring bet. The founders bet that people would work for free if you gave them a tiny bit of power and a sense of belonging. This is the ultimate business win. Imagine a factory where the workers pay the owner for the privilege of operating the machinery. That is the Reddit model. They harnessed the labor of millions of volunteers to categorize the internet. They built a system where the users themselves provide the content, the moderation, and the engagement. All the company had to do was provide the empty rooms. Let us look at the hard reality of the numbers. There are over 100,000 active subreddits. Each one represents a different market segment. When you spend 30 minutes reading about the best tires for a Ford F-150, you are not just a car enthusiast. You are a high-value lead for the automotive industry. When you ask for advice on a health forum about a chronic pain in your back, you are providing medical data that pharmaceutical companies would pay a king's ransom to access. The sheer volume of this data is staggering. We are talking about billions of comments and trillions of votes. Every single interaction is a data point in a massive map of human desire. The strategy was never about being a social media giant like Facebook. It was about becoming the ultimate search engine of human opinion. The move from a desktop site to a mobile-first platform was the first major gear shift in the expansion engine. They needed you to be connected at all times. They needed your thoughts while you were standing in line at a Starbucks in Chicago or sitting on a bench in Central Park. The mobile app became the probe that reached into your pocket. It tracked what you looked at, how long you lingered on a post, and what made you angry enough to comment. Anger is the most profitable emotion on the internet. It drives engagement. It keeps you on the site longer. The architect knew that if they could keep the users in a state of constant low-level debate, the data would keep flowing. Do you think your anonymity on Reddit protects your identity? Or is the lack of a real name actually the key that unlocks your most honest and valuable data? On Facebook, you are who you want your grandmother to see. On Reddit, you are who you actually are. You talk about your fears, your fetishes, your political leanings, and your financial struggles. This honesty is the most precious commodity in the 21st century. It is the raw fuel for artificial intelligence. By allowing users to hide behind pseudonyms, Reddit created a safe space for radical honesty. And that honesty is exactly what Google and OpenAI are buying. They are not buying your name. They are buying your soul in the form of your syntax and your sentiment. The cold analysis of the Reddit blueprint reveals a strategy of strategic neglect. For years, the leadership allowed the site to remain ugly and difficult to navigate. This was not a mistake. It was a filter. It ensured that the people who used the site were the most dedicated, the most obsessed, and the most vocal. By keeping the barrier to entry slightly higher than Instagram or TikTok, they cultivated a higher quality of data. They created a culture of experts and enthusiasts. This is why when you search for a product review, you add the word Reddit to the end of your Google search. You trust the community because they have skin in the game. But the irony is that your trust is exactly what is being monetized. The modern echo of this blueprint can be seen in the recent changes to the site's interface and its aggressive push toward monetization. The walls are closing in. The Open API was the last vestige of the old democratic Reddit. By closing it, Steve Huffman and his team effectively declared that the era of the playground is over. The data refinery is now fully operational. They are cleaning up the site to make it more attractive to advertisers. They are removing the dark corners and the controversial content to ensure that brands feel safe. They are turning the digital landfill into a high-end shopping mall, and the long-term users are finding that their old neighborhood has been gentrified beyond recognition. The strategic mastermind knows that growth requires sacrifice. To reach a valuation of over $6 billion, they had to sacrifice the very openness that made the site popular in the first place. They had to turn against their most loyal users. They had to prioritize the needs of shareholders over the needs of the community. This is the bittersweet reality of the tech industry. A community is just a stage in a business cycle. Once the data is acquired, the community becomes a liability that must be managed and controlled. As you scroll through your feed tonight, ask yourself this: are you the one using the app, or is the app using you to calibrate its understanding of the human condition? Every time you hit that upvote button, you are casting a vote for a future where your thoughts are the product. You are part of a global experiment in mass data collection, and the results are being sold to the highest bidder in real time. The architecture of Reddit is a masterpiece of manipulation and strategic foresight. It is a system that turned a hobby into a harvest. A community built on a lie is a community that lasts. This is the uncomfortable truth that lies at the heart of the Reddit origin story. We like to imagine that great movements start with a spontaneous explosion of human interest. We want to believe that the front page of the internet was born from a pure democratic desire to share knowledge. But the hard reality is far more clinical. The birth of Reddit was a controlled experiment in psychological manipulation. It was a mirage created in a cramped apartment to trick the world into thinking that something was happening when there was actually nothing but silence. To understand the ruthless logic of Reddit, you have to go back to the moment when the founders decided that the truth was an obstacle to growth. Imagine a small, poorly ventilated apartment in Medford, Massachusetts, in the sweltering heat of June 2005. The temperature outside is 88 degrees Fahrenheit, and inside it feels even hotter. The air is heavy with the smell of cheap takeout and the electric ozone of hardware running at its limit. Two young men, Steve Huffman and Alexis Ohanian, are hunched over their monitors. They are part of the very first class of Y Combinator, the legendary startup accelerator. They have a simple goal to build a way for people to find the most interesting things on the web. But they have a problem that every social platform faces at the beginning. It is called the cold start problem. A social network without people is just a graveyard. Do you believe that the first 1,000 posts on Reddit were written by enthusiastic early adopters? Or do you suspect that the entire foundation of the site was a carefully orchestrated ghost show? The strategic mastermind does not wait for the crowd to arrive. He creates the illusion of a crowd to lure them in. In those early months, Huffman and Ohanian were not just developers, they were 1,000 different people. They created hundreds of fake accounts with different names and distinct personalities. They would find a link, post it under one fake name, and then log into another account to comment on it. They would argue with themselves. They would joke with themselves. They spent their days and nights talking to mirrors, creating a digital theater of activity. This was not a mistake or a hobby. It was a calculated move to move the needle of human psychology. Humans are social animals. We do not want to be the first person at a party. We want to enter a room that is already buzzing with energy. By faking the activity, the founders were setting a trap for the real users who would eventually stumble upon the site. They were establishing the tone, the humor, and the rules of engagement before a single outsider ever showed up. They were the architects of a culture that appeared to be organic but was actually manufactured in a laboratory of necessity. This was the first blood. They killed the possibility of an organic, slow growth in favor of a synthetic, accelerated reality. The mundane metaphor for this strategy is the nightclub with a long line outside but an empty dance floor inside. The line is there to signal value. It tells the people driving by that something important is happening behind those doors. Reddit was that empty dance floor, and the founders were the ones dancing in the dark, pretending the music was deafening. It worked. Real users began to trickle in. They saw the fake conversations and thought they were joining a vibrant community. They began to contribute their own links and their own comments. Slowly, the fake accounts were retired and the real ones took over. The mirage had become a reality. But the DNA of the site was forever altered by this initial act of deception. Let us look at the hard reality of the competition in 2005. Reddit was not the only player in the game. The undisputed king of the hill was Dig. Founded by Kevin Rose, Dig was the giant that everyone feared. It had millions of users and a valuation that made Reddit look like a lemonade stand. While Reddit was struggling in a hot apartment, Dig was the toast of Silicon Valley. But the strategic mastermind knows that the bigger the giant, the harder it falls when its own logic is turned against it. The war between Reddit and Dig was not won through better technology. It was won through a ruthless understanding of community betrayal. The turning point came during what is now known as the Great Dig Migration. Dig made a fatal error. They prioritized their advertisers and their corporate partners over the very users who built the site. They changed their algorithm to favor professional content over user-submitted links. They ignored the core principle that Reddit had mastered the feeling of ownership. When Dig users felt like they were no longer the ones in control, they looked for an exit. They looked toward the small, ugly, and chaotic site that still felt like the Wild West. Steve Huffman and his team were ready. They didn't need to spend millions on marketing. They simply kept their doors open while their rival burned its own house down. Do you think that the fall of Dig was an accident of bad design? Or was it the inevitable result of a platform forgetting that its users are the only true asset? The data shows that within a single year, the traffic on Reddit exploded while Dig collapsed into irrelevance. This was the first major scalp for the Reddit team. They had outlasted the giant by being leaner, meaner, and more focused on the raw data of human interaction. They learned that as long as you provide the right incentives, the community will do the work for you. They learned that the user is not a customer to be served, but a resource to be mined. The modern echo of this origin story is found in the current state of the internet. Today, the internet is flooded with bots. Artificial intelligence models are now doing exactly what Huffman and Ohanian did in 2005. They are generating content, starting arguments, and creating the illusion of human presence. We have come full circle. The very tactic used to save Reddit in its infancy has now become the greatest threat to the integrity of the entire digital world. But for Reddit, this is not a crisis, it is a return to form. The platform was built on synthetic engagement. It was designed to thrive in a world where the line between real and fake is blurred. The strategic analysis of this period reveals a chilling insight. The founders of Reddit knew that to build something great, they had to be willing to break the rules of social etiquette. They had to have skin in the game, and that meant risking their reputations on a lie. They understood that in the attention economy, the appearance of value is often more important than value itself. They didn't build a better search engine. They built a better mirror for human vanity. As we look back at those early days, we must ask the reversal question. If the foundation of the most influential community on Earth was built on fake accounts and manufactured debates, can we ever truly trust the consensus that emerges from it today? Or are we still just wandering through a digital theater, performing for an audience of algorithms that was programmed in a hot apartment 20 years ago? The first blood was not just a historical anecdote, it was the blueprint for the world we live in now. Growth is a predatory beast that must be fed with more than just users. It requires infrastructure, control, and a total abandonment of the past. To the average Redditor, the expansion of the site felt like a slow and sometimes annoying update to their favorite digital haunt. But to the strategic mastermind, this was the assembly of a global surveillance and monetization engine. The expansion was not about making the site better for you. It was about making you more legible to the machine. Between 2014 and 2024, Reddit underwent a transformation that was as ruthless as it was inevitable. They stopped being a website and started being a sovereign digital territory with its own laws, its own currency, and its own borders. Imagine a massive shipping port like the one in Long Beach, California. Thousands of steel containers are stacked stories high, stretching for miles along the coast. Each container holds something different, from high-end electronics to cheap plastic toys. For years, Reddit was just the port authority. They provided the space, but other companies provided the ships and the trucks. Third-party apps like Alien Blue, Apollo, and Reddit is Fun were the vehicles that moved the content. But the architects realized a hard reality. If you do not own the trucks, you do not own the data. If you do not own the interface, you are just a landlord letting someone else build a billion-dollar empire on your land. This realization sparked a decade-long war to centralize power. Do you believe that the push for the official Reddit mobile app was about improving the user experience? Or was it a calculated move to place a tracking device in the pocket of every user? The strategic analysis is clear. In the desktop era, a user was a ghost. They had an IP address and a browser cookie, but they were difficult to pin down. In the mobile era, a user is a goldmine. The official app allowed Reddit to see where you are, what time you wake up, and how long you linger on a specific image while standing in a grocery store line in suburban Dallas. It allowed them to move the needle on ad targeting from a broad guess to a surgical strike. To achieve this, they had to engage in a policy of scorched earth against the third-party developers who had helped build the platform in its lean years. The acquisition of Alien Blue in 2014 was the first shot across the bow. It was a strategic harvest. They bought the most popular third-party app, integrated its features, and then slowly began to choke the life out of the competition. They introduced features that only worked on the official app. They made the API more restrictive and more expensive. They were building a walled garden, and they were doing it brick by brick while the community was distracted by the latest viral cat video. The goal was simple: total vertical integration. Reddit wanted to own the content, the hosting, the distribution, and the data. Let us look at the hard reality of the redesign in 2018. To the veterans of the site, it was a disaster. It was slow, it looked like Facebook, and it broke the soul of the old, text-heavy interface. But to the strategic mastermind, the redesign was a necessary sterilization. The old Reddit was a dark, unmapped forest where brands were afraid to go. It was too chaotic, too raw. The redesign was the pavement. It turned the forest into a well-lit shopping mall. It made the site legible to the corporate world. It allowed for promoted posts that looked just like regular content, blurring the line between a genuine recommendation and a paid advertisement. This was the expansion engine in its purest form. They were not just scaling the number of users, they were scaling the revenue per user. The mundane metaphor for this stage is the gentrification of a neighborhood. First, the artists and the weirdos move in because the rent is cheap. They create a culture that is vibrant and unique. Then the developers notice. They build high-rise apartments and bring in a Starbucks and a Whole Foods. The original residents complain that the soul of the place is gone, but the property value skyrockets. Reddit gentrified itself. They took the raw, chaotic energy of the early subreddits and forced it into a standardized, brand-safe template. They traded the soul of the community for the bottom line of the balance sheet. Do you think that the introduction of Reddit Gold and Community Awards was a fun way to support the site? Or was it the implementation of a psychological Skinner box designed to extract microtransactions from a captive audience? By creating a digital currency, Reddit gamified participation. They turned validation into a commodity. They found a way to make users pay for the privilege of praising each other. This moved the needle on revenue without requiring more ads. It was a brilliant piece of behavioral engineering. It gave users a sense of skin in the game while the company took a cut of every digital transaction. In 2021 alone, these digital goods contributed millions to the company coffers. The strategic expansion also required a massive investment in safety and security, which is corporate speak for censorship. To become a multi-billion-dollar public company, Reddit had to solve the problem of its most toxic corners. They began a series of purges, banning thousands of subreddits that were considered brand risks. This was not a moral crusade, It was a business necessity. You cannot sell ad space next to hate speech or extreme content. The mastermind knew that they would lose some of their most active users, but those users were a liability. They were the friction in the machine. By removing them, Reddit made the site more palatable to the massive marketing budgets of Fortune 500 companies. The sheer scale of this operation is hard to comprehend. We are talking about data centers that consume as much electricity as a small city in Nevada. We are talking about thousands of employees in offices from San Francisco to Dublin, all working to ensure that the machine never stops. The expansion engine was fueled by venture capital, with over $1 billion raised in multiple funding rounds. Each dollar came with the expectation of a massive return. The pressure to grow at all costs led to the ruthless moves we see today. It led to the decision to charge exorbitant fees for API access, effectively killing off apps like Apollo and sparking the massive blackout of 2023. The modern echo of the expansion engine is the AI deal with Google. This was the final stage of the plan. The data that had been gathered and categorized over 2 decades was finally ready to be sold as a finished product. Reddit is no longer just a place to talk. It is a proprietary data set that is essential for the future of human technology. The expansion is complete, the port is fully operational, the trucks are all owned by the company, and the users, they are the product being shipped to the highest bidder. As you navigate the site today, do you feel like a member of a community, or do you feel like a data point in a vast, cold calculation? The transformation of Reddit from a simple link sharer to a global data empire is a testament to the power of strategic obsession. It proves that in the digital age, growth is not just about getting bigger, it is about getting more control. It is about turning the chaos of human interaction into the order of a corporate ledger. This was the expansion engine. It was a decade of silent moves, calculated betrayals, and massive technical feats. It turned a hobby into a hegemony. And the best part for the masterminds? Most of the people using the site didn't even realize it was happening until the doors were already locked. The greatest transfer of wealth in the digital age did not happen in a mahogany boardroom or over a steak dinner in Lower Manhattan. It happened in thousands of messy bedrooms where the air smelled of stale energy drinks and the only light came from the flicker of high refresh rate monitors. Most people remember the GameStop saga as a heartwarming story of the little guy finally winning against the big bad hedge funds. This is a fairy tale for the naive. In the cold light of strategic analysis, the January 2021 short squeeze was something far more terrifying. It was the first time in history that a decentralized crowd used a digital platform to perform a coordinated hit on the global financial system. It was not a protest, it was a bloodbath. Imagine the high floor of a skyscraper in Midtown Manhattan. The temperature outside is a biting 30 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside, the air is thick with the silent panic of men who are losing $100 million every hour. Gabe Plotkin, the founder of Melvin Capital, is staring at a screen. He is one of the smartest men on Wall Street, a protege of titans. He has a short position on a dying retail store called GameStop. On paper, his logic is flawless. The company is a relic of the past, a mall-based dinosaur in a digital world. But Plotkin made one fatal mistake. He forgot that on the internet, logic is secondary to momentum. He didn't realize that a subreddit called Wall Street Bets had identified his position not as a smart play, but as a target. Do you believe that the GameStop squeeze was a spontaneous uprising of angry gamers? Or was it a calculated exploit of a systemic vulnerability that was discovered through the sheer brute force of collective data analysis? The reality is that the users of Reddit didn't just buy a stock, they weaponized the platform's architecture. They used the upvote system to amplify the most aggressive bullish theses, creating a feedback loop that moved the needle of the entire market. They understood the mechanics of the gamma squeeze better than many professional analysts. They were not just investors, they were a digital swarm of locusts descending on a cornfield of short interest. The hard reality of the numbers is staggering. In just a few weeks, the price of GameStop shares rose from under $20 to a peak of $483. That is a move of over 2,000%. Melvin Capital, a firm managing over $12 billion, saw its value crater by 53% in a single month. They had to be bailed out by Citadel in .72 with a nearly $3 billion infusion. This was not just a loss, it was a public execution. The strategic mastermind looks at this and sees the terrifying power of the Reddit community when it finds a singular enemy. The platform provided the coordination, the anonymity, and the raw emotional fuel to sustain a war that lasted weeks. The mundane metaphor for this event is a flash mob at a high-end art auction. Imagine a group of 1,000 people in hoodies walking into Sotheby's and outbidding the world's billionaires for every single painting. They are doing it not because they want the art, but because they want to see the billionaires cry. That is what happened to the New York Stock Exchange. The gatekeepers of capital found themselves locked out of their own game. They had spent decades building a system based on information asymmetry, but Reddit had flattened the playing field. The data was now public, the strategy was now crowdsourced. The skin in the game was no longer just money, it was identity. Do you think the shutdown of the buy button on Robinhood was a technical glitch or a desperate act of class warfare? The controversy that followed proved that the war had moved beyond Reddit and into the halls of the United States Congress. When the trading platforms realized that the crowd was winning, they changed the rules in the middle of the game. This move only deepened the resolve of the Redditors. It turned a financial trade into a holy war. The subreddit grew from 2 million users to over 8 million in a matter of days. The server cost for Reddit must have been astronomical, but the data being generated was priceless. Every comment was a record of a historic shift in human behavior. The cold analysis of this war reveals a new paradigm in business. Reputation is now a liquid asset that can be drained in an instant. A single post by a user like Deep Fucking Value, whose real name is Keith Gill, was enough to mobilize billions of dollars. This is the ultimate nightmare for a traditional CEO. You are no longer competing against other companies. You are competing against an invisible, decentralized, and highly motivated community that does not care about your quarterly earnings. They only care about the meme. They only care about the win. The bloodbath of 2021 changed the financial industry forever. It proved that the front page of the internet was also the most dangerous place in the world for your capital. As the dust settled, Reddit emerged as the ultimate victor. While hedge funds were bleeding and retail investors were losing their life savings in the eventual crash, the platform itself gained something far more valuable than money. It gained total relevance. It proved that it was the center of the digital universe. It showed that it had the power to break the most established institutions in the world. This was the moment Reddit stopped being a social site and became a weapon of mass disruption. You believe that the moderators are the beating heart of Reddit. You see them as the dedicated guardians of your favorite niches, the volunteers who keep the trolls at bay and ensure that the conversation remains civil. This is a comforting delusion. In the cold light of strategic expansion, the moderators are not the heart. They are the disposable gears in a massive, grinding machine that has outgrown its need for them. They are the systemic debt that Reddit accumulated over 20 years, a massive liability of free labor that the company is now forced to liquidate. The friction you see today is not a simple disagreement over policy. It is a class war between a digital landlord and a tenant union that forgot it never signed a lease. The scene of the 2023 API protest was a study in corporate silence. Imagine the headquarters in San Francisco on a Tuesday morning in June. The temperature outside is a crisp 62 degrees Fahrenheit, but inside the executive suites, the atmosphere is freezing. Steve Huffman is not looking at the thousands of subreddits that have gone dark. He is not reading the open letters from angry moderators who feel betrayed after a decade of unpaid service. He is looking at the server logs. He is looking at the traffic drop and calculating the exact moment when the outrage will fatigue. This is the bittersweet reality of the expansion engine. To become a public company, Reddit had to break the power of its most loyal workers. Do you believe that a company valued at over $6 billion can survive on the whims of volunteers who can shut down the platform at any moment? Or do you realize that the very existence of the moderator class is a structural flaw that the strategic mastermind must eventually correct? The hard reality of the business world is that no serious investor wants to own a piece of a company where the production line can be stopped by a group of hobbyists in their basements. For years, the free labor of moderators allowed Reddit to move the needle on growth without spending a cent on community management. But as the initial public offering approached, this free labor became a high-interest debt. The moderators thought they were partners. The company knew they were just a temporary solution. The mundane metaphor for this systemic debt is the unpaid intern who has been working at a high-end law firm for 10 years. The intern thinks they are indispensable because they know where all the files are and how the coffee machine works. But the moment the firm decides to go public, the lawyers realize that having a 10-year intern is a legal and financial liability. They don't give the intern a corner office. They change the locks and hire a professional security team. Reddit changed the locks on the API, and the moderators found themselves standing in the cold, holding keys that no longer turned. The historical echo of this friction goes back to July of 2015. The firing of Victoria Taylor, a beloved employee who managed the Ask Me Anything subreddit, sparked the first major blackout in the site's history. The air was thick with the same sense of betrayal back then. The community felt that the corporate side of the house didn't understand the culture. But look at the data from 2015 to 2023. No, it grew. It became more profitable. It attracted more venture capital. Did the site die? This taught the architects a vital lesson. The community will scream, they will cry, and they will threaten to leave, but they have nowhere else to go. Digital addiction is the ultimate hedge against labor unrest. Let us look at the hard reality of the social cost. To prepare for the initial public offering, Reddit had to perform a massive sterilization of its content. This is the process of brand safety. They banned thousands of subreddits, not just for hate speech, but for being weird, for being niche, and for being difficult to explain to a marketing executive at Coca-Cola. They traded the unique, jagged edges of the platform for the smooth plastic surface of a suburban shopping mall. This is the systemic debt of gentrification. When you remove the friction, you also remove the heat. The site became safer, but it also became sterile. The data shows that while the number of users is up, the depth of engagement in many legacy communities has plummeted. They are harvesting more data, but the quality of that data is becoming increasingly diluted by the corporate oversight. Do you think that the rise of artificial intelligence will finally make the human moderator obsolete? Or will the loss of human oversight turn the front page of the internet into a hall of mirrors filled with bot-generated garbage? The strategic analysis suggests that Reddit is banking on the former. They are moving toward a system where AI handles the bulk of moderation, reducing the company's reliance on the unpredictable whims of humans. This is the final stage of the liquidation. The unpaid workers who built the data refinery are being replaced by the very algorithms their data helped train. It is a perfect closed loop of exploitation. The friction is not just about money or APIs. It is about the fundamental nature of the digital experience. We are living in an era where the platforms we use every day are becoming increasingly hostile to the people who use them. This is the bittersweet truth of the bottom line. Every feature you loved about the old Reddit was a cost that the company could no longer afford. The freedom to browse without an account, the ability to use third-party tools, and the power of subreddits to govern themselves were all luxuries of the pre-IPO era. In the hard reality of a $66 billion market cap, those luxuries are considered inefficiencies. The modern echo of this debt is found in the way we talk about the internet today. We speak of the enshittification of platforms, a term coined to describe the process where a site becomes progressively worse for its users as it seeks to extract more value for its shareholders. Reddit is the poster child for this phenomenon. The friction we see is the sound of the machine grinding as it moves from one phase of its life to the next. The strategic mastermind doesn't care about the noise. He only cares that the machine keeps moving. As you look at the current state of Reddit, ask yourself this. Is the site still yours, or are you just a guest in a house that is being sold from under you? The systemic debt of the moderator class is being cleared, and the cost is the very sense of community that made the site famous. But in the cold world of business, a community is just a collection of data points waiting to be monetized. The war is over and the landlord has won. The only question that remains is how much longer you are willing to pay the rent with your attention. We have reached the end of the digital trail. You began this journey believing that Reddit was a quirky corner of the internet where the little guy had a voice. You thought it was a place of democratic ideals and shared hobbies. But after dissecting the blueprints and the bloodbaths, the hard reality is staring you in the face. Reddit is not a community. It is a $66 billion monument to the commodification of human thought. The strategic mastermind did not build a social network. He built a data refinery that turned the chaos of the internet into a predictable, sellable, and highly efficient product for the age of artificial intelligence. The question is no longer whether Reddit will survive its transition into a corporate giant. The question is whether the internet as we know it can survive the model that Reddit has perfected. Imagine a vast library that stretches for hundreds of miles under the cold earth of the Nevada desert. Every book in this library is a conversation. Every page is a piece of advice, a joke, a confession, or an argument. For 20 years, the doors to this library were open to everyone. But as the sun sets on the era of the open web, the guards have arrived. They are locking the gates, they are charging a toll at the entrance, and they are selling the entire collection to a handful of tech giants who want to use these words to build machines that can think for themselves. This is the ultimate fate of the Reddit legacy. It is the transition from a living, breathing culture to a dead data set. Do you believe that the soul of Reddit died during the protests of 2023? Or do you realize that the soul was never part of the business plan to begin with? The strategic analysis is brutal. In Silicon Valley, soul is a liability. It is the friction that slows down growth. It is the unpredictability that scares away institutional investors. Steve Huffman understood this better than anyone. He was willing to be the villain of his own story if it meant moving the needle on the valuation. He had skin in the game, and he was willing to lose a few fingers to save the arm. To him, the community was the fuel, and once the tank was full, the fuel became secondary to the engine itself. Let us look at the hard reality of the current market. Following the initial public offering, Reddit has solidified its position as one of the most important players in the AI gold rush. The $60 million deal with Google is just the beginning. Every major player in the field of large language models needs what Reddit has. They need the raw, unpolished, and diverse data of millions of human beings. They need the syntax of the angry gamer and the sentiment of the hopeful gardener. This data is the oil of the 21st century, and Reddit is the biggest oil field on the planet. The moves that seemed like betrayals to the users were actually masterstrokes of supply chain management. By closing the API, they secured their monopoly on the most valuable resource in the world. The mundane metaphor for this final verdict is the local coffee shop that becomes a global franchise. At first, you love the shop because the barista knows your name and the chairs are comfortable. But to become a multi-billion-dollar empire, the shop has to remove the comfortable chairs. It has to standardize the coffee. It has to prioritize the drive-through over the experience of sitting down. You might complain that the shop has lost its charm, but the shop doesn't care. It is now part of the global economy. It is serving millions instead of dozens. Reddit has become the Starbucks of human conversation. It is efficient, it is profitable, and it is everywhere, even if the personal touch is gone forever. The modern echo of this transformation is found in the way we use the internet today. We are increasingly trapped in walled gardens. The era of the open, interconnected web is being replaced by a series of high-density data silos. Reddit was the last major holdout of the old world, and its fall into the corporate machine marks the end of an era. When you scroll through a subreddit now, you are walking through a graveyard of digital democracy. The structures are still there, the names are still there, but the power has shifted. Every action you take is being harvested to train an algorithm that will eventually make your input redundant. Do you think that you can leave? Or have you realized that the bottom line of human psychology makes escape impossible? The data says that despite the blackouts and the anger, the users returned. They returned because Reddit is the only place where this specific type of human interaction exists. The mastermind knew this. He knew that even if people hated him, they loved the platform more. He leveraged human addiction to fuel a corporate takeover. This is the ultimate victory of the strategic mastermind. He didn't just build a better product, he built a better trap. The cold analysis of the Reddit saga proves that in the world of high-stakes business, the community is always the sacrificial lamb. It is the entity that builds the value, but it is the one that is discarded when that value needs to be liquidated. This is not a failure of the system. It is the system working exactly as intended. Reddit is the blueprint for the future of social media. It is a future where your thoughts are the property of shareholders and your conversations are the training manuals for your digital replacements. As we look at the friendly orange alien logo today, we must see it for what it truly is. It is not a mascot of a community, it is the brand of a data corporation. The strategic obsession with growth, the ruthless war against developers, and the systematic clearing of human debt have all led to this moment. Reddit is a winner in the most brutal sense of the word. It has successfully moved from the fringe to the center of the global economy, and it has done so by leaving its past behind. Is this the version of the internet we wanted, or Or is it simply the version we deserve for being so willing to give away our data for a bit of digital validation? The tragedy of Reddit is not that it changed. The tragedy is that we let it become the model for everything else. The mastermind has delivered his verdict. The case is closed. The data has been harvested. This was behind the logo.